Hi everyone and welcome to week 5. I cannot believe it's week 5. It's all just flying by so quickly. So make sure that you're checking the announcements that are being posted in the news section. If you didn't really pay attention to those and you just came right over here to dive into material for the week, make sure you do that. There's some important information there for you on how things in some of the other areas of the class are going. I just want you to make sure that you're up to speed with everything. So I'm not going to spend any more time, John, about here. Let's dive into the material for the week. This week we segue into method. We have spent our first 4 weeks talking about sort of introductions. We've defined communication. We have located intrapersonal communication. We've defined and hopefully understand the self and self-talk. And then this last week we did imagined interaction theory, which I have really enjoyed and personally had some good stuff that I realized about myself dealing with imagined interaction theory. So now those first 4 weeks were really sort of about giving us the foundations, giving us some theory. Now we move into method, okay? And so this week I am going to introduce autoethnography to you. It's a strange word, I know, but ultimately this is going to give us a method to explore ourself, which sounds strange, but that is what it is. So we're looking at methodologies of self-exploration. So let's just get into this. Autoethnography is a strange word. So autoethno whaty? So let me just begin with some definitions, okay? And let me preface these definitions with where I'm going to end the PowerPoint today. We're going to end today with me assigning your final paper, okay? We're going to end our screencast series with me showing you the final paper assignment, explaining it to you in a screencast so that you know what you're doing. And guess what? It's going to be an autoethnographic paper. So what we're going through in our screencast is very important and it's very applicable to what you're doing in your final paper. Okay, so I need to define what autoethnography is to start. So it's an approach to research. Okay, now I know that you're not doing professor or grad student level research, but you are doing student level research. You're doing student level writing, and it's extremely important. And so I want to introduce this method as an effective method for us to get at intrapersonal communication, okay? And so what it does is it seeks to describe and systematically analyze, which that's the graphy part, okay? Personal experience, so that's auto. In order to understand cultural experience, that's the ethno. So that's where we get the word autoethnography, okay? So you are going to be learning about analyzing personal experience, understanding cultural experience, and bringing it all together. Okay? So this approach challenges canonical ways of doing research and representing others. I'm going to go very briefly into what was called the crisis of representation, and that'll sort of explain where this birthed out of. The crisis of representation sort of gives us the spinal cord for what this is about, okay? It treats research as a political, socially just, and socially conscious act. Now, when it says political, it's not political in the way that your Facebook post is probably, or your Facebook feed, maybe you do post, I don't know. But your Facebook feed right now is probably filled with all sorts of political things. It's not political in that way. It's political in that doing research and representing others involves identity politics. It involves impacting others. Decisions on the page impact people in real life, okay? So that's where that comes from. Socially just and socially conscious act. So you participating in this means that. And so here's what happens. You as the researcher, and I don't know if you've ever thought of yourself that way, but that's what you are. You are a student, and now you're not a professional researcher yet. You might be in your job. I don't know what you do, but you do research as a student, so you're a researcher. You use tenets of autobiography and ethnography, and we will break those two things down. Okay. So autobiography and ethnography, to do and write autoethnography. Thus, it's a process and a product, okay? We'll talk a little bit about the process. We'll talk about the product actually in week 6. You'll get to examine some sample autoethnographies in week 6. We'll talk about them so that you really understand what this can look like and be, okay? So, trucking right along here, let's get to the crisis of representation. I said that the crisis of representation is the sort of the spinal cord for what brings autoethnography about. So what happened is in the social sciences, and the social sciences is a very broad disciplinary field. The social sciences, and it'll depend on the college sometimes as to what fits where. Yeah, you know, even the different campuses of Front Range Community College have different breakdowns of disciplines. And so on some campuses, communication is in the social sciences. In some places, it's in the arts. Some places we put the arts and social sciences together. It's you never really know. But social sciences sort of include psychology, anthropology, sociology, usually communication, stuff like that. Okay, so this crisis of representation comes about around the 1980s, 1990s. It's from postmodernism sort of kicked it off. Okay, and so really the crisis of representation leads to not just autoethnography. Okay, autoethnography is just one of the many offshoots of the crisis of representation. Okay, but it is at its roots a response to and critique of the modernist positivist approach to sciences, to the social sciences. Okay, it doesn't mean that the modernist or positivist approach is wrong. It doesn't mean that it doesn't produce good results in research. It doesn't mean that the knowledge that the modernist positivist approach gives us is wrong. It means that some of the assumptions that fueled the modernist and positivist approach prior to the 80s and 90s needed critique. It was a very sort of one-sided worldview where it was okay to do some things we're going to talk about that it's not okay to do anymore in research. Okay, one of the main things that comes out of this is, first of all, researchers realize that they don't want to contribute to a master narrative or meta narrative. If you've taken my agricultural class, you know more about what that is. But what a master narrative is it's sort of like the narrative, the story of a group of people. And these researchers, social science researchers, said, you know, really all we're doing is we're serving to create a story that only includes some voices and excludes others. And so the crisis of representation says, you know what, we don't want to contribute to the master narrative. We want to learn about and we want to engage humans, but we do not want to just lump it all together into one master narrative. And then really what this is look, there's a relationship. And it's not just about knowledge. There's a relationship. There's a relationship between these three things. Okay? You have the relationship of the author. Okay, now the author is you. You are going to be the author. Okay? You are going to be the author here. So as the researcher and the creator of text and meaning, that's what you do. That's what you do. Now you're not doing this for publication in a scholarly journal. You're doing this for a 200 level intrapersonal communication class. But even at that level, there is this relationship. So author as the researcher, author is the person who's doing the work and figuring it all out, and as the person who creates the text and creates the meaning, ultimately. The audience. So you have the author and the audience, which makes sense. Both the reader, okay, and the original subject of the research. So who's going to be the reader here? You're writing your final paper in this class for me. You can share it with other people if you want to, but I guess I am the audience, okay? But you are also an audience. And so you are the original subject of the research here, okay? And then the text, the actual text, the words on the page. If it's a digital document, if it's a printed document, whatever it is, there's a relationship between these three, all right? And before the crisis of representation, this idea of a relationship wasn't around. The researcher would just was all about getting their research and writing it and getting it sent out. There wasn't even much of a relationship between the author in the text in the way that there is now. Okay, it was there, but not like there is now. So if we keep going here, to help explain, the researchers realized the importance of stories as a result of the crisis of representation, because modernist, positivist approaches to the social sciences were not about stories. The story was way too subjective. It was way too personal. It was just chock full of bias and not really telling of anything. Well, the crisis of representation says actually stories are important. They're really complex. They are constitutive. And what that means is that they create meaning. They create the reality that people find themselves in. The stories that we tell help us understand where we're at and how we live in the world that we're in. They are meaningful phenomena. You can tell a story to create something true and real and useful. They teach morals and ethics, and this is even when we don't mean to. Okay, one of the gifts of postmodernism is that postmodernism says everything is laced with ideology. You can't be free from the fact that a simple story or a simple act, it isn't just that. There's always something more to be gained with that. And so when we tell stories, we teach morals and ethics, even if it's not the goal. Okay, so what they said is that in modernist, positivist, old approaches to science, in the social sciences, anyways, it was teaching a set of morals and a set of ethics, even without even intentionally doing that. Okay, and then it introduces unique ways of thinking and feeling, which is going to be very important for us in this class, right? So telling stories introduces unique ways of thinking and feeling, and it helps people make sense of themselves and others. This is going to be a very important thing in our class this semester as well, because this is what we're doing with our study of intrapersonal communication. We are trying and working toward understanding ourselves and our self-talk and how we can improve that in important ways. Okay, so I'm almost done with the crisis of representation, but I've only got about 2.5 minutes left of recording time, so I'm going to hit the next screencast. I'll see you there.